what I do find that I think is applicable for a lot of people is that we can end up eating foods that actually detract from our energy. So it's not so much that we're underfed, it's that we're eating foods that don't actually agree with our system. So for some people, that could be alcohol, it could be sugar, it could be processed inflammatory foods, pro-inflammatory fats, it could be foods that your gut is sensitive to. And I think that lack of awareness or that lack of desire to acknowledge, maybe the 2 glasses of wine at the end of the day actually aren't working for you. Case in point, like I am that person that is in complete denial that my body hates alcohol, but like I love to finish my day with 2 glasses of wine and call it good. And I think that that's where we get into more of that conversation around our relationship with food, right? If I am intentionally ignoring the signals that my body is sending me, I am further creating a gap between the trust that I have with my body and my body trusting me to take care of it. And just like any relationship, when you are constantly undermining what the other party is asking you for, right, it creates a sense of distrust.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. The Outdoor Minimalist podcast has the goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. In episode 120 of the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, we're exploring a topic that has been on my mind throughout most of 2023, honestly, and now especially as we enter 2024. I've been reading the book called Reclaiming Body Trust, and that book has had me rethinking and evaluating on a deeper level my relationship not only with food, but also my relationship with my body. And especially as we enter the season of New Year's resolutions, I think it's important to consider how we can continue to build a healthy relationship with our food and with our perception of ourselves. That's why I sat down to explore the idea of building a healthier relationship with food both on and off the trail with Heather Kelly. Heather was born and raised in Alaska, where she still calls home today. A 2-time NCAA National Champion in women's rowing and voted CRCA Pocock All-American her senior year, she still considers herself an athlete and loves all things from CrossFit to weight training to long walks in the woods. While studying at Western Washington University, she earned a degree in evolutionary nutrition and went on to study at the Institute for the Psychology of Eating to become a certified eating psychology coach. Heather believes that we all have a relationship with food, and it's important to cultivate a healthy, satisfying relationship with our diet for long-term health. She's the founder and CEO of Heather's Choice, which produces healthy, lightweight, packable meals and snacks for adventurers worldwide. Every product is handmade in their dedicated gluten-free kitchen in Anchorage, Alaska. The Heather's Choice mission is to put good food in everyone's pack, no matter where their adventure may take them. Now, before I get to my interview with Heather, I have one more announcement, and it's really exciting. It is that the official trailer for the Forever Chemicals 10-part podcast series just dropped today. You can listen to it right now exclusively on the Outdoor Minimalist podcast page, and soon more sneak peeks will be coming through. So if you want to stay up to date with the latest, be sure you're subscribed to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com. Thank you for joining me on the Outdoor Minimalist podcast today, Heather. I am looking forward to today's topic. It's one that has been on my mind a lot in the last few months. So I'm happy that you have time to sit down and discuss it with all of us. But before we jump right in, I have to ask you, because you're a guest on the show, how did you first become interested in outdoor recreation, and how does it fit into your life now?
Yeah, I love this question. So I was born and raised here in Anchorage, Alaska, which is where I'm calling in from today. And, growing up in Alaska comes with its own dose of the outdoors. Growing up, going salmon fishing or going camping, that was just sort of built into our everyday. It wasn't until I was hired as a raft guide at 18 years old in my hometown of Girdwood that I really started to get excited about, going on backcountry trips. And it was actually pack rafting that was kind of my first introduction to putting on a backpack, carrying a boat, a life jacket, a helmet, a dry suit, and all this stuff so that you could go, walk to the headwaters of a teeny tiny creek somewhere and then float back out. So I feel like my introduction to the outdoors was a little bit on the epic side, but super duper fun. And today, as a business owner, I wish that the outdoors played a bigger part in my everyday, but I would say the bulk of my recreation involves walking my dog. So not so epic anymore.
Same for me. So did your background with the outdoors and kind of how you were raised, did that influence your career choice now, or what led you to starting Heather's Choice?
Yeah, so I did grow up going to work every day with my dad. He owned the first microbrewery in Anchorage when I was a kid. So I feel like entrepreneurship is just kind of baked into my DNA. And my dad likes to give me a hard time because here at Heather's Choice, we have 3 warehouse bays. And we bring our dog, Django, who's a German Shepherd, to work with us every day. And I get to work with my sweetheart, Brad, who's my business partner. And growing up as a kid, my dad had 3 warehouse bays. We took the German Shepherd to work every day, and my mom and dad worked together in the business. So my dad will just be very quick to give me a hard time that I have recreated my childhood. But honestly, when I was younger, I was way more into the arts. Like when I went off to college, I thought I was going to study photojournalism, and getting recruited for the women's rowing team sort of pulled me in a totally different direction and really got me into athletics and sports and, training, all of that. And the Heather's Choice evolution was such a crazy conglomeration of getting introduced to rafting, becoming a collegiate athlete, learning everything I could about eating for performance, going on extended backcountry rafting trips, and poof, this idea for Heather's Choice was born. So it was definitely a lot of years in the making and very, very organic.
Yeah. And for the listeners that don't know, can you explain what Heather's Choice is?
Sure. So Heather's Choice is a line of dehydrated meals and snacks for adventuring. I started the business in the summer of 2014 with 2 small tabletop dehydrators, a Sharpie, and a Shopify website. And I had no idea what I was doing. Didn't know I was getting into food manufacturing, didn't know anything about permitting, didn't know what a margin was. It was all just very naive of me to think that I was going to launch a food business. But that was 9 years ago. And now we're a team of 11 that cook, dehydrate, package, ship, market, and sell everything from here in Anchorage.
That's amazing. Kudos to you for sticking with it all those years and growing it to be what it is today. So working in food is really interesting to me, especially with your background, being an athlete, and working with, I'm sorry, my brain is, because you had, working with nutrition. That's what I wanted to say. Okay, so especially with your background as an athlete and then working with nutrition, has your view of food changed or evolved at all throughout your life, especially owning a business that revolves around food?
Yeah, for sure. As a kid, I was really fortunate that I was raised by the mom who just always fed us good food, right? Like we would eat wild caught salmon and locally grown potatoes and peas and everything organic. And that was just sort of part of our everyday. Now, being a business owner and running a food business, there's a few things that really stand out to me, which is just how far removed a lot of us are from where our food comes from. And I would expect that people would have a lot more interest and curiosity about ingredient sourcing or who makes the food or how the food is made. And there's sort of a surface level interest for a lot of people, but there's not necessarily as many people as I would have thought who would have been digging deeper into, again, the ingredient sourcing or the thought process that goes into every product that we make. And I think that that's something that I've kind of failed at as a business owner, is not doing a great job of really communicating to our customers just how much intentionality goes into every product we make, whether that's sourcing grass-fed bison or grass-fed beef, wild-caught Alaskan sockeye salmon, or even the macronutrient balancing that we try to incorporate into every meal. I feel like there's a ton of intentionality that we bring to the Heather's Choice Adventure menu. And then we do a pretty poor job of communicating that to our potential customers and sort of inviting them to be a little bit more curious about how much thought we are putting into the adventure menu.
Yeah. Okay. So your mom was a big influence in kind of that curiosity aspect, it seems like. So has the way that you've interacted with food kind of changed throughout the years from when you're a kid to when you're at university and then to now?
Yeah, my life journey has been a little bit bumpy, but especially my relationship with food. So as a kid, I was fed really well, just ate, did kid things, and like ate whatever my mom made, and it was no big deal. Going off to college, I suddenly was living in the dorms and I was eating whatever was in the dorm cafe, right? Like donuts and skim milk and cereal and like who knows what, right? Like whatever was available, it was just a free for all of eating. I ended up with head to toe psoriasis. I was so flippin' sick my freshman year of college. I looked like a leper. And for people who don't know, psoriasis is an autoimmune condition. So when you're having these really massive breakouts, it's your body saying like, hey, your immune system is on high alert, right? Like something is wrong. And my option as a freshman was, okay, I'm going to go find a dermatologist. I'm going to figure out what's going on. This is the first time I've ever experienced this. And I was presented with the opportunity to take a whole bunch of steroids to like calm down the inflammation. Well, as a college athlete, the word steroid is a little intimidating. So I was like, okay, that's not an option. Like, I'm not going to do steroidal creams or pills. Like, I'm just not going to take care of this. So then all of a sudden I found myself really working hard to resolve my health issue with food. I took it way too far and suddenly was not only trying to resolve my autoimmune condition, I was also trying to be as thin as humanly possible, because in a sport like crew, it's a weighted sport. So like every week I would have to submit 3 erg times for 2,000 meters, which for anybody who has rowed 2,000 meters, they know how terrible the race distance that is. It is the worst 7 minutes of your life. But every time you submitted these times, you would submit your weight as well. So a heavier athlete should typically be able to pull 2,000 meters faster because they have more weight to throw behind the oar and they can move the boat faster. Well, my strategy was the lighter that I am, the bigger score I would have. And that created basically a 2-year period of my college rowing career where I was probably exercising 24 hours a week and eating 1,500 to 1,800 calories a day, less if I could get away with it. And it became the most all-consuming thing ever, which I think any female collegiate athlete that's ever lived through that can relate. It becomes the only thing that you think about from the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep at night, which put me on a whole new path of having to learn about eating psychology and sort of recover from this really disordered eating pattern. So that caused me to go off and to study at the Institute for the Psychology of Eating when I graduated from Western. And it actually catapulted me into my first business where I was doing eating psychology and sports nutrition coaching for CrossFit athletes all across the country. And as you can imagine, that journey, that very abridged version, has created a lot of changes in how I feed myself every day. And it's been very exploratory, and I feel really grateful of where I've landed on the other side of that experience. But I don't think everybody is as lucky. And now when I meet other people who have lived through an episode of disordered eating, you can kind of like pick those people out in a room. right? It's like you just kind of know, like, oh, you had the same struggles that I did, or you are still living through it. So it's a topic I feel really passionate about because I don't feel like it gets acknowledged as much, especially in our industry. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are silently suffering with their relationship with food and don't have the tools that I was so fortunate to kind of stumble across.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I do think that it could be discussed much broader in the outdoor industry, especially among athletes. And I mean, just people who recreate outside, because a lot of the times just casual recreationalists are doing really strenuous activities and can become very narrowly focused on their diet, their exercise regime, all of that stuff. So thank you for sharing your journey, first of all. Adventuring plans on your calendar? Remember to grab your Lava Linens travel towel on your way out the door. Founded by a mother-daughter team, Lava Linens crafts durable, luxurious travel towels as a more sustainable and better performing alternative to microfiber and cotton towels. Powered by flax, hemp, and Tencel, they're designed to be by your side for years to come. Use the code Outdoor Minimalist for 15% off your next order. Kind of moving through that, how were you able to build a healthier relationship, not only with food, but also with your body?
Yeah. When I realized my sophomore year of college that I had had the opportunity to make the varsity 8 boat, which was my singular focus in life, that tends to be, I find myself getting like really, really focused on one thing and then get a little bit obsessive. And that's all that I think about. So at that point in my life, all I wanted was to make that varsity 8 boat. And I wanted to be one of the top girls on my team. Again, in crew, the top 8, there's only 4 portside rowers and 4 starboard. So I basically had a 1 in 4 chance to get a seat in that boat. And when the day came that we did seat racing, where you line up 2 boats side by side, you race X number of meters, the coach will then take you and swap you with somebody else in the other boat, race the boats again, and you see what happens. I think I was probably hovering around like 135 pounds, which I'm 5'9". I was a shrimp, right? And I wasn't very healthy. And I got my butt kicked in that seat race. Like, it wasn't even close. This girl, Gina, took me to the cleaners on that. And boom, that was it. Like, there went my opportunity to row in the varsity 8. My season was over. And I distinctly remember my coach coming up to me at nationals, because I went as a sub, and he put his arm around me as our boat crossed the finish line and won their, I think at that time, 4th national championship. And he's like, Heather, I want you to go home and I want you to gain 10 pounds and I want you to come back ready to work next year. And that recognition from somebody that I really respected, and somebody who my coach like didn't use a lot of words, right? Like, I can probably count on my hands like how many real conversations I had with him. And that was one of those moments of like, okay, like my number one goal is to row in that varsity 8. My coach, who I really respect, just told me, like, if you want to do this, you're going to have to eat and you're going to have to show up strong, not little. And that was a really big turning point. So I went home to Alaska. I flippin' ate like there was, no tomorrow. And I came back 15 pounds heavier in the fall and got into the varsity 8 boat and then got to row there for 2 years. And so for me, that was a really big turning point of recognizing the connection between being well fed and performing at your best. And again, I was really fortunate that I'd had the experience of what it feels like to be really weak, to be kind of fragile, to be undernourished. And so now it's a really big point that I try to drive home for anybody that I get to talk to about this, which is that if we're underfed, if we're undernourished, like, we can't show up as the best version of ourselves, no matter what we're trying to compete in.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like you carried a lot of those lessons throughout your life, but as we are aging and growing and our life circumstances are changing, I would assume that some of those like applications of what you learned have also changed. So, like, as our bodies and nutritional needs shift from each season, how can we be more in tune with those things?
Yeah, man. I will say, as somebody who went from, again, exercising 24 hours a week to basically walking my dog full time, you would think that there would be a great big reduction in the number of calories that I eat every day. However, as somebody who continues to track my food as just a tool in my toolkit, it's really incredible for me to see how much food I'm still able to enjoy each day and maintain some energy levels. What I do find that I think is applicable for a lot of people is that we can end up eating foods that actually detract from our energy. So it's not so much that we're underfed, it's that we're eating foods that don't actually agree with our system. So for some people, that could be alcohol, it could be sugar, it could be processed inflammatory foods, pro-inflammatory fats, it could be foods that your gut is sensitive to. And I think that lack of awareness or that lack of desire to acknowledge, maybe the 2 glasses of wine at the end of the day actually aren't working for you. Case in point, like I am that person that is in complete denial that my body hates alcohol, but like I love to finish my day with 2 glasses of wine and call it good. And I think that that's where we get into more of that conversation around our relationship with food, right? If I am intentionally ignoring the signals that my body is sending me, I am further creating a gap between the trust that I have with my body and my body trusting me to take care of it. And just like any relationship, when you are constantly undermining what the other party is asking you for, right, it creates a sense of distrust. So I think for a lot of people, there's an opportunity to get really curious and to really kind of own and acknowledge where you are disowning your body or ignoring your body's signals, whether that's for more food, less food, different food, more sleep, more water, whatever it is. But especially in modern day society, I think that we are highly, highly conditioned to ignore our body's signals and to instead look to external resources to tell us how to feed ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Great insights. This is so fun to hear you talk about all of this. Do you think that I guess like body trust or like lack of awareness, do you think that kind of ties into some of the misconceptions that we likely have about what we should be eating, how much we should be eating, and just generally how we fuel ourselves?
Yeah, I saw that as a college athlete that kind of the nutritional wisdom was like eat more carbohydrates, right? More bagels, more bread, more rice, more pasta, whatever. Well, as a college athlete with an autoimmune condition, like that didn't work for me, right? Like a lot of those highly processed carbohydrates and grains were actually creating more inflammation in my body than like I could handle, hence the psoriasis breakouts. So I think for one, people are conditioned to overeat carbohydrates, right? That is just, they're cheap, they're easy, they're abundant, like it, and especially in the outdoor community, right? There's always conversation about getting in more pasta, more rice, more carbs, more simple carbs. What I find as a professional and as a sports nutritionist is that 9 out of 10 people are severely under eating protein. And the issue with that is that protein is the most satiating of all the macronutrients. So if you have your carbs, your proteins, and your fats, if you were to sit down and eat, let's say, a grass-fed ribeye with 50 grams of protein, you would get an actual hormonal response in your body. Your brain would actually signal to you like, oh, I'm full, I've eaten, I'm satiated, right? And you would push back from the table and you would be like, okay, I've eaten, I'm ready to go on to the next thing. What I find a lot of people do is they're so fearful of calories that they would never eat a grass-fed ribeye because they're scared of all the fat calories in there. And so then they just consistently reach for low calorie options like 100 calorie packs of popcorn, low calorie energy bars, fat-free oatmeals, all this stuff that never actually signals to their brain, yes, I have eaten and I am full. So I think that people could absolutely benefit from paying attention to how much protein they're eating every day. And if I had somebody as a client, that would be the first thing I would have them do, is track their food and tell me, how many grams of protein are you eating? Because that will be the fastest way to help regulate their appetite. Additionally, people having an awareness of how many carbohydrates they're eating in a day, right? If you or I were to go and have a cupcake, let's say like a gluten-free Simple Mills almond flour cupcake with cream cheese frosting, like something that sounds like it fits into that spectrum of being healthier for you, just the sheer number of sugar in that, assuming it's not paired with anything else, is going to cause such a sharp spike in your blood sugar levels with a subsequent crash on the other side of it, that it doesn't matter whether you've had enough to eat today. Your body is just saying, "Wah, my blood sugar's low, feed me," right? So whether it's blood sugar regulation, it's not eating enough protein, it's it being in a constant dieting mindset, there are so many ways that people can get tripped up with their day-to-day nutrition, which is why I'm such a strong advocate for tracking and for starting to gain an awareness of like, oh, I had 2 eggs, bacon, English muffin, cheese, avocado, apple, whatever for breakfast, and I didn't think about food for the next 4.5 hours. What a freaking miracle that is. And I think there's just way too many people out there who haven't yet conducted those experiments to find out what it feels like to have sustained energy throughout their day.
Yeah, that's so interesting. As someone that transitioned to like a plant-based diet several years ago, I definitely noticed that I at the beginning was eating like so much more. And it was because I wasn't eating the same types of protein. So I didn't necessarily know how to like fuel myself appropriately. And now I've kind of found a better balance. But it was interesting to hear you talk about that because I was like, yeah, I definitely experienced being so hungry all of the time. And it's because I was eating like just kind of like basic carbs, like things, I don't know. I didn't know how to eat as a plant-based person, but I learned. So that's good. But it also made me think of something called intuitive eating. So I've heard that term thrown around a lot. So how does that, I guess, relate to kind of like trusting your body, learning to read your signals, and then appropriately feeding it nutritionally? I don't know how to phrase that, but there you go.
Yeah, no problem. I think a really helpful sort of framework for this, and this is something I learned from the Institute for the Psychology of Eating, which if anybody wants to know more about this stuff, they should just pick up a copy of Nourishing Wisdom by Mark David. It's a fantastic book, and it was absolutely instrumental for me in kind of healing my relationship with food. But if we imagine that we go through different seasons and phases with our diet, right? We might be in an experimental phase. So you switching to a plant-based diet in the beginning was very experimental of like, I don't know yet how this works. I don't know if this fits me, but like I'm trying it on for size. We might also be in a therapeutic season, right? So somebody like myself with an autoimmune condition might go on an autoimmune paleo protocol diet with the intent of healing one or more systems in the body, right? So we have sort of this experimental, this therapeutic, or we can be in more of like a maintenance phase of life, right? I would say for myself, I'm definitely somebody who's just like, okay, food needs to get me through my busy day. I need to feel cognitively here enough to operate this business on all cylinders. So like food is serving the purpose of allowing me to feel present and grounded and here in my everyday. So if you can kind of identify what season you might be in with your diet, that will make it easier to say, all right, I'm in a maintenance phase. I'm just going about my life. I don't have any specific goals, physical, healing, experimental, whatever it is. So now if I invite intuitive eating into my day, can I trust myself enough if it gets to 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I realize I haven't drank any water, but I want to reach for the chocolate chip cookies that are sitting on the counter downstairs. This is a real life story in my, day to day here. Do I have enough curiosity to say, okay, what happens if I have a glass of water first? Like, is my body intuitively telling me that I need to eat the chocolate chip cookies? Or is my body telling me I actually haven't drank enough water today And this is distracting. Like, this is something that's available to me that will give me a quick hit of energy. But I know for myself well enough, having conducted a million of these little experiments, that chocolate chip cookie is actually not going to make me feel better. It's actually going to lead to some guilt, maybe a sense of like ickiness afterwards because it was just pure sugar and it's not what my body actually needed. But again, that to me is an intuitive way to eat, just as much as somebody else making the decision, hey, I had a really skinny breakfast. I didn't get enough to eat today. I had a really hard workout yesterday. I am going to make the choice to eat the chocolate chip cookie, and I'm going to move on with my day and realize that 120, 150 calories is actually not going to completely undermine the rest of the healthy food choices I make in my day-to-day life. And I think that's where intuitive eating invites you to, again, conduct these experiments and to pay attention rather than to follow somebody else's hard and fast rules, right? Like, you might anticipate that for me as a sports nutritionist, I might be like, no cookies ever. And that is not the reality that we live in, right? Especially when they are homemade by your grandma and you get to see your grandma once a year, like, eat the damn cookie and move on with your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I am always wary of nutritional advice that is like very like hard and like dry, where it's like these foods are good, these foods are bad, because and it's impossible to navigate, and no one body is going to be the same or react the same to this like different types of foods. So yeah, I love the idea of intuitive eating, but yeah, also being in tune with like, what does that actually mean when my body is cueing me like that? So that's so interesting. And something that I have realized with a lot of like hiking and backpacking, especially with different partners, is when I'm out on the trail, everyone also eats much differently. And some people, they don't snack, or I'm someone who absolutely like every hour, I'm like, I'm eating a snack. This is just my body wants like little things throughout the day, not necessarily like a big meal while I'm hiking. So, how can we apply all the things that you were discussing when we do go out on the trail or a paddle trip, whatever it might be that we're doing outside?
Yeah. So I mentioned already that I'm a strong advocate for tracking your food just to get some sort of baseline for you at home, right? If I know that on average I eat 2,200 to 2,400 calories a day in my everyday life, that can really help me plan for any sort of backcountry trip, because I can know, all right, I don't walk the dog 8 miles in a day, like, but I'm going on an 8-mile backpacking trip, for that one day. I probably am going to require some more food, right? So having some sort of caloric baseline, I think, is helpful. And then one of my favorite lessons from the whole world of eating psychology is recognizing the difference between men and women, right? So me having my partner, Brad, and knowing that Brad is that person who will just go all day long and will never eat until he gets like a little hangry, a little snappy, a little snippy, right? And then I have to remind him like, hey, you haven't eaten anything all day and you're being kind of a brat. Like, I need you to eat something to like bring your blood sugar back up and like get level again. In sharp contrast, we as women, like, we are so much better suited for smaller, more frequent eating occasions. And if I was to look at the staff here at Heather's Choice and I was to kind of poll, the male versus female demographics that we have, I bet that would be pretty darn consistent, that our male employees eat 2, maybe 3 times a day. The women probably eat 5 to 6 times a day. And I think that's where we get into trouble again with trying to create really general nutritional recommendations for people on these extended backcountry trips, because it is different male to female. We could talk about not only eating occasions, but also macronutrient balancing. Like, women are just straight up better at burning fat for fuel than men are because we naturally carry more body fat. So if I had a female client who's like, hey, Heather, I'm going on an extended backcountry trip, what should my nutrition look like? I would definitely load them up on good, healthy fats that are anti-inflammatory and are going to be nourishing, because it can be such a fantastic fuel source rather than sending them out with a ton of refined carbohydrates and wondering why they feel so unstable and why they feel like they do have to constantly reach into their pack for the next thing to eat because they're straight up not getting enough real nutrition. They're just getting calories. And I think that that's a really big distinction that I, again, don't hear it talked about enough in the world of backpacking or backcountry trips, is the difference between simply getting in your calories every day versus getting in the macronutrients that your body needs to actually thrive.
Yeah, and I would assume that a lot of those like macronutrients that you might need might differ a little bit than like, when you're at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good quick math equation for people to use, if I am being hired as somebody's nutritionist, the first thing I'm going to do is strongly push them to eat about a gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. Most people don't know what their lean body mass is. So to make it even easier, a gram of protein per pound of body weight. People will not be hungry when they are following that program. And you would know that from your experience of eating a plant-based diet. To get 100, 150, however many grams of protein a day takes real intentional work. So right there, you're immediately going to take care of the fact that people aren't going to be hungry and they're going to be able to maintain their lean body mass. Because a lot of times what happens is people go on these extended wilderness trips, they're putting a ton of strain on the body, they're not eating enough protein, and their body is literally breaking down their lean muscle tissue in order to fuel everything else, right? Which is not great. Anybody who's ever tried to gain muscle in their life knows how calorically expensive it is and how hard it is to gain lean muscle. So let's not give it up simply because we're under eating protein. You can definitely, again, for somebody who's just starting, I would look to get a gram of carbohydrates per pound of body weight as a baseline. And then depending on how intense of a trip you're embarking on, it might ramp up to 2 grams of carbs per pound of body weight, or depending on the person and their mountaineering, maybe it's 3 grams, maybe it's just crazy. And then same thing with fat calories, you can actually ratchet those up or down to meet your caloric needs. So if I was packing for myself for a backcountry trip at 150 pounds at 5'9", I would shoot for 150 grams of protein a day. I'd probably give myself 200 grams of carbohydrates because I eat 150 grams in my day-to-day life. And I'd probably give myself 100 grams of fat, and I'd be bumping up against 2,700, 3,000 calories a day. And I would feel wholly fueled for that backcountry trip. So that's where we kind of have that intermingling of the intuitive eating, right? And sort of like learning your body, but then also the macronutrient or caloric planning that you can do. And then again, conduct those experiments to say like, whoa, that was way too many fats. I couldn't even digest it all. It was too much. I didn't eat half the stuff that I brought, whatever it ends up being. But you don't know what the outcome of the experiment is if you're not going in with some sort of hypothesis that you're testing.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And kind of looking back to some of the misconceptions that you mentioned earlier that we might have about like general nutrition, how do you think those kind of play into how we choose our trail food? I would assume carbohydrates and sugars have a lot to do with it.
Totally. I definitely think there's a lot of emphasis on just straight calorie counting, and that has a place. But again, I feel like the application of we take somebody in their day-to-day life, they need 2,000 calories a day. If they get 2,000 calories worth of just strictly carbohydrates, they are forever going to be hungry. They're going to be cranky. They're not going to be as healthy as they can be, and they're not going to recover well from workouts. So like, it's not simply a calories in, calories out equation. And same thing for these extended backcountry trips where, sure, if you're going for the weekend, you can probably get away with a lot, right? You can get away with eating probably just about anything and then go back to your normal every day and be fine. If you're going to be out there for 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30 days, that strategy is going to catch up with you. And so that's where I think for me, I've had the benefit of going on 30-day expeditions and being like, oh, okay, I actually have to feed myself for the entire month. I need to be a little bit more intentional about this. So for the person who is planning for a backcountry trip, I would strongly advocate for them to get a lot more clear on that macronutrient balance and how they can balance that even on a backcountry trip. So question mark, how do you get enough protein in your breakfast? Or do you have high protein snacks? What are the fats that you're eating? Are they mostly pro-inflammatory fats from canola, grapeseed, peanut? Like, is it just all pro-inflammatory stuff that's going to be overriding your system? Or do you have some more nourishing fats in there, whether that's coconut oil or olive oil or, wild caught Alaskan sockeye salmon, things like that, that are once again going to be more nourishing to your system. And I would strongly advocate for people knowing how they respond to different carbohydrates, right? Like you might say to me, Heather, every time I eat quinoa, it like tears me up. I just can't, like my gut can't handle it. Or somebody else might have a real sensitivity to nightshade, so they can't eat potatoes. But again, if they don't have that awareness in their everyday, it's going to be really difficult for them to plan accordingly for the backcountry.
My name is Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental journalist investigating the rise, pollution, and now regulation of a class of chemicals known as PFAS. Throughout this 10-part series, you'll hear from guests from all around the world who have a stake in the legislation, production, and use of PFAS chemicals. They'll answer questions like, what is PFAS?
PFAS is a very big group of fluororganic chemicals and polymers. They have a fully fluorinated or perfluorinated moieties in the structure, at least one, meaning that at least one carbon is all bonded to fluorine and not hydrogen.
Why is PFAS used so widely?
They are exceptionally high performance chemicals. They work very, very well at what they do. Primarily, they're designed as coatings or as films. They resist heat, they resist oil, they resist grease, they resist water, and they bond very tightly. Why is PFAS dangerous?
Due to this bond, the fluorine-carbon bond, they have what we call extraordinary properties. Carbon-fluorine bond is the strongest we know in organic chemistry. And that's one of the main reasons that PFAS are persistent. And that means that there are no known degradation products in the environment. They don't mineralize.
And how can we move forward as an industry?
What's been great about the outdoor industry is we're talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody is being quite open, I think, in sharing. Everyone's got their maybe some brand technologies and things that are more confidential, but broadly, people are talking, and product designers are talking, and material management is talking about it. And I think that's the key. That's how we'll accelerate, towards the finish line, is by not holding back information, trying to be open and share as much as we can.
Tune in March 2024 to hear this 10-part podcast series. As the host and creator of this show and Black-Footed Ferret Productions, it is my goal and mission to provide free and accessible information for all. We are an independent podcast and rely on listener donations to produce content like this. To donate, follow the link in the show notes. And thank you for making this production a possibility. I mean, planning food for the backcountry is something that I've experienced with a lot of trial and error. Like you're saying, like play out those experiments, see how it works, listen to your body. And in the last few years, I have begun to try backpacking meals. I haven't tried Heather's Choice yet, sorry, but I will get to it.
That's all right. We're not going anywhere.
Awesome. So if we are looking to shop for backpacking meals, I have noticed like certain brands seem to tailor to certain things, and sometimes their serving sizes are really small or they're really large. So how can we kind of apply those experiments to like purchasing the right backpacking meals for our needs?
Yeah, I would advocate for people trying to as closely resemble what they eat in their day-to-day life with their backcountry food choices. So if you're the person who is just, a garbage dumpster for food, right? You can eat anything and you feel fine and you just motor along in your day-to-day, like, sure, maybe you don't have to pay as much attention. If you're somebody like me who is sensitive to gluten, is kind of put off by like low quality dairy, doesn't eat a lot of pro-inflammatory fats, or like really can't stomach 760 calories in a single serving, like just knowing enough about myself, I can say like, this option is not going to work for me. Like, this is not in line with my day-to-day nutrition, and it's going to leave me just feeling like ick. So that's where the beautiful thing is that not only are there a ton of really awesome boutique backpacking food brands out there, like I could probably name a dozen of them. So there should be an option out there that fits your nutritional needs. So if it was plant-based, like I would look at the Heather's Choice African peanut stew, or the Farm to Summit gals. Like, they have a full line of like really bougie, awesome, dehydrated, veggie forward meals. So knowing what your nutritional needs are in your day-to-day life, and then applying that to your decision-making as you are exploring the hundreds of backpacking meal options that are out there.
Yeah, there are so many options. I feel like every year I find a new one. And I use Farm to Summit a lot because of that reason.
I love those gals. They don't know that I'm such a fan, but like, their branding is so beautiful, and their mission of repurposing, vegetables that wouldn't otherwise get used. And again, like for you, that meal is going to be so nourishing because it's wholly values aligned for you. And I think that that's where, for me, like knowing that I'm a freaking protein maniac and I need 25 grams of protein in a meal for it to even like put a dent in my hunger, that's going to be part of my decision-making matrix. Of like, okay, does this actually have enough protein for me to feel satiated after this meal? And that's where, again, it's so much more intuitive than it is hard and fast rules when it comes to nutrition, because we are so different.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I could listen to you talk about nutrition all day. But if you were to give the listeners, I guess, one piece of advice, or like condense one piece of advice, maybe you already shared, about building a healthier relationship with food and their bodies, what would it be?
I would encourage people to recognize that our relationship with food is actually the longest standing relationship we'll have in our lifetime. Right? As soon as we pop out of the womb, the first thing we do is we cry, and then we're fed and we feel better. And that response is so baked in to us at a cellular level. And I witness people just not have an awareness of that. And then it ends up getting abused, right? Where if I have a hard day at work and I go home and I eat whatever I can find in the pantry, and I have an entire bottle of wine and a great big dinner and dessert afterwards, like, at some point, my body has to kick from the fight or flight response into rest and digest. So you just basically overload your digestive system, and it forces you into more of a relaxation response because your body has to digest all of that food. And because I witness people doing that so much, I would just invite people to get really curious of like, okay, am I using food as a way to actually nourish my body, nourish my energy levels, like take care of myself? Or am I completely ignoring my body's signals for more food, less food, whatever it is? And am I treating my body as if it is not important and like it doesn't matter? And then wondering why I'm not sleeping well, why I don't have the energy to get up in the morning, why I'm snapping at my girlfriend because I didn't eat breakfast today, like whatever it is, like there's just so much opportunity to become aware of how we show up in the world, depending on how we're feeding ourselves. And unfortunately, I think there's just a lot of people out there who don't feel fed, nourished, taken care of. And that ends up creating some really mucky, weird stuff with food because it's legal, it's relatively cheap. Like it is a drug that we can abuse in a whole myriad of ways. So I wish that people had more of an awareness of how food reacted in their body and how it caused them to show up, because it's so profound. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you and I are in agreement on this. We show up differently when we are physically taken care of.
Yes, I absolutely do agree with that. And it can be hard. Like, so I do want to recognize that sometimes caring about what you eat can be put on the back burner, like pretty easily. And like accessibility to proper nutrition isn't always an option, especially in the United States. So doing the best with what you have is also a great option. But you can do a lot with that in a lot of cases as well. So I guess with that, how can listeners learn more about you and also check out Heather's Choice?
Yeah, you can find everything Heather's Choice at heatherschoice.com. We have a full adventure menu, and our mission is to put good food in people's packs. So again, we make everything from scratch here at our kitchen in Anchorage. We dehydrate it, package it up, and ship it all across the US. You can find us at REI. You can find us at over 150 independent sporting goods stores across the country. And if you want kind of a sneak peek into our world, we're most active on Instagram at Heather's Choice. And I hope that this conversation is yet another reminder for me to talk about this stuff more, because I obviously care so much. But I find that as a business owner, I'm spending more time just working in the business every day and not having as many opportunities to have these conversations as I would like to. So I appreciate the invite and the chance to, get on my soapbox and rattle on and on about our relationship with food, because it really freaking matters.
Yeah, it matters so much. And I'm so glad that you had time to share those experiences with all of us.
Yeah, anytime.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book, on YouTube, or subscribe to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com. For even more updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.